So there's been this deck floating around for quite some time now, and it goes by the name of TF Swain. And this deck is still absolutely nuts busted. It's so good. Not busted, but very, very good if you know how to pilot it. It's essentially a control-oriented deck. You wait out until the late game when you're able to get some of your puzzle pieces on board. And by puzzle pieces, I mean Swain and Leviathan, and of course, good old Simp-Tide Rex. So if you guys are looking for a deck guide on TF Swain, you're in the right spot. As always, do not forget to subscribe to the channel for tons of Runeterra content, tournaments, decks, all that good stuff. My name is Justin, also known as Shit Just Works, and today we are going to be going over TF Swain. All right, peeps, we're going to change it up a little bit. As always, we are going to go through the actual deck list itself first, but only going to do one game this time. I don't know. I'm just going to try it out. The game is a little bit slower. Usually I speed up the games a lot, and now it's only sped up just a little bit this time, but it is a pretty solid game nonetheless. But anyways, all right, TF Swain. Kind of surprised I haven't already done a deck video thus far on this deck yet, just because it was so prevalent in the last format or metagame as well before Call of the Mountain. Post Call of the Mountain, this deck is still nuts. If you look at the deck list overall, just scrolling through it real quick, there are no new cards in here. And actually, I believe, with the exception of House Spider, Arachnoid Sentry, for the most part, a lot of these cards are actually from Rising Tide. So, I don't know, just pretty cool to see that this deck is actually still good even after so many new cards are released. But anyways, this deck mainly, if you've never played it before, it mainly operates as a control deck. So your main point or main goal here in the game is to get to Leviathan, Swain, and Simp-Tide Rex. Riptide Rex, baby. So sometimes you'll see people playing 3 Riptide Rex in here as well, but all of these tools, all of these lower cost mana cards are basically just to stall out the game until you get some of these puzzle pieces on the board. As we all know, Leviathan, probably one of the best followers in the game, if not the best follower, plus Swain on board is almost always just game. Your opponent can't really do much every turn with Leviathan going off, Swain stunning everything on your opponent's side of the field. You have Twisted Fate as your second champion in here, which is really more of a utility pick, right? He gives you so many options. Getting something like, as an example, a Dreadway Deckhand to get a keg out, or even a Petty Officer to get a keg out, and then red carding with Twisted Fate feels really good. Why? Well, not only do you do 2 damage to the whole board and probably clear your opponent's board early game, or at least do a significant amount of damage to it to maybe follow up with a Make It Rain and clear it. Well, let's say your opponent has 3 units plus their Nexus. That's 2, 4, 6, 8 damage. You can sometimes just level up Swain with one red card and a keg. So just something to think about. Twisted Fate also affects Swain's level up there. So not to mention Salvage. There actually are a decent amount of games, especially nowadays. It doesn't seem like there's as many ways to remove Twisted Fate, especially if you're going up against something like Asol. He kind of tends to stick around on the board a little bit more. So being able to salvage for a Twisted Fate level up, or, which actually happens more often than you think, drawing a second Twisted Fate to level up Twisted Fate. Usually you want to wait until the 4th, the Twisted Fate's at 4, maybe it's your opponent's turn. At the end of the turn, you play it, the pick a card, and then it goes into your turn, you draw 4, you level up the TF. So TF is obviously a win condition in and of himself as well. So other than that, lots of just ways to flood the board. You got Petty Officer, you got House Spider, Arachnoid Sentry to essentially stop your opponent, their attack turn, and that combos super well with Ravenous Flock, as does Make It Rain. Ravenous Flock, oh god, if Leviathan's the best follower in the game, I have been converted. Ravenous Flock, I believe, is the best 1-cost spell in the game. 4 damage, feels really good. Sure, they need to be damaged or stunned, but god, especially in this deck, so easy to deal damage or stun. You chump block with House Spider, does damage, Ravenous Flock. Play Make It Rain, does damage, Ravenous Flock. Arachnoid Sentry, Ravenous Flock. So, not to mention, you get multiple Swain in your hand. It feels really good to play a Ravenous Flock, or Swain's Ravenous Flock, and shuffle the Swain back in. Like, having infinite Ravenous Flocks potentially available in your deck is absolutely nuts. So with that said, there's a lot of very specific interactions with this deck, but let's just go ahead and get into the game. All right, so we have Swain TF versus a very, very prevalent and popular deck right now. Basically Nightfall, right? It's got Diana, Jesus, and Nocturne. This deck is aggro. It's aggro. It even goes face. You got stuff like Doom Beast. We don't always see the Solari Soldier, actually, so it's kind of interesting to see that as a 1-drop. A lot of times people just kind of go all in on the Nightfall route. But hey, it's still a pretty good 1-drop, deals 3 damage. I'm already at 17, so definitely a good choice for the deck. So, what's our goal, you might ask? Well, like we were talking about going through the deck itself, we want to stall out the game until we're able to stick a Swain, stick a Leviathan, get a Symptod Rex down, right? So, we have a lot of options already. Something like the Petty Officer. Actually, getting the Sparring Student is always feels good with Petty Officer. I'm not going to lie. It instantly becomes a 2-2. Especially if it was on our opponent's attack turn. It feels really good. But anyways, getting the Petty Officer down basically just gives us extra chump blockers. Even if the Sparring Student is only a 1-1, it's still really good. Now we draw a House Spider. God, see, and this is why Sparring Student is so good in this deck, because then you have other Petty Officers, other House Spiders. Now all of a sudden we have a 3-3 on board, and it just really makes it difficult for our opponent to push any damage. Getting this Sparring Student traded with the Solari Soldier feels amazing. Not gonna lie. So now back over to us. We've managed to basically shut down at least one of their attack turns, taking no damage, which is definitely big in this deck. You gotta remember there is not much heal, so any damage that you take is likely sticking. And when they have stuff like this Overwhelm, you need to be very, very aware of that. And generally speaking, you want to do everything in your power to avoid taking damage, even if it means losing some card advantage, because trust me, you do not care. That is one of the basics of aggro and burn matchups. You just need to save your life total, which is exactly what we're doing here. Unfortunately, aren't able to kill the Overwhelm unit this turn. Not really quite sure why the House Spider was played. I guess what that tells me is they probably just have a not that great of a hand in general, and they're probably going to open attack. Which, I mean, honestly, open attacking, it does not really make sense against Swain TF. It does against something like ASOL, because ASOL decks and ramp decks and stuff like that do not really have many ways to punish development. Open attacking. They do punish development, whereas Swain TF, I mean, it kind of deals with both in the same way. Noxian Fervor is a great tool in this specific scenario to go ahead and kill some of these Overwhelm units. We also have the Arachnoid Sentry, which right now is going to be able to shut down Diana, which also matters. Now, all right, listen. 3... this is terrible. I mean, we can kill 1 unit, and then we can also Ravenous Flock a unit, right? So we could probably Ravenous Flock this Diana. We can go ahead and Noxian Fervor this 7 attack Overwhelm so that we don't take as much damage. But damn, it feels bad. This just feels so incredibly bad. It looks like we're actually Ravenous Flocking the Overwhelm unit as well. But this is what I mean, right? Like, you need to be focusing on, okay, what deals the most amount of damage in all these, what prevents the most amount of damage in all these situations. Unfortunately, we still take some due to the Overwhelm, but we got rid of most of their Overwhelm units and are still at 10 health. Now we're at a point where we're at 7 mana. We have plenty of mana to do what we need to do to clear the board out. You see we already have a Swain in hand. We already have a Riptide Rex. Once we're able to get this Riptide Rex off, it's usually game. I mean, if you make it to turn 8 and you're able to trigger Riptide Rex against an aggro deck, you are in a damn good spot. But one of the things you need to be aware of with Riptide Rex, like, this deck does not play Warning Shot, doesn't play Yordle Grifter, things like that. It's a little bit harder sometimes to get the Riptide effect off. So you need to be preparing a couple turns ahead of time with things that are going to do damage. So you do have Make It Rain. Obviously, you can see in this particular situation, Make It Rain is not going to do much to actually deal damage for the Riptide. It's one of the reasons why we did play the Zap Sprayfin, so that we know we have an elusive unit to potentially attack. But with how wide our opponent's going, that's not going to work either. So instead, we're forced to do something like what we're doing here, which is, again, preventing the most damage. Doesn't feel good Noxian Guillotining. Wow, is that a word? Noxian Guillotining? The Zap Sprayfin into the dog, which is just inherently losing advantage, but we save as much life as possible, only going down to 6. This is like red zone, all right? This is like, You don't want to be this low. Like, once you're below 8 health against burn and aggro decks, shit gets real. All right, you got to start worrying because it's not fun. Right here, we're actually trying to go for a Riptide hit, and we... the RNG gods! Terrible. We don't get the Plunder off because the Make It Rain misses. So, instead of playing Riptide, which probably... it would have just put us in a really good situation to win the game, I think. We are forced to end up playing the Swain here, which isn't bad. I mean, I say forced to play the Swain like it's like terrible compared to Riptide, but it's really not that bad. It does kind of force out a block from my opponent, which usually aggro decks do not want to block. They want to keep units on board as long as possible to try to still potentially go as wide as possible, especially when we see something like Nocturne. That unit would have been fearsome, and the only thing we would have had to block would have been the Swain next turn. And that keg is sitting there, but we don't have anything to utilize the keg. And this is another great example of, like, all right, now we see an elusive unit on field. That's really bad for us because that's right now something that is 100% going to get through. So we have to make sure we are killing things and preventing damage. Right now, what's going to prevent the most damage? Getting rid of Nocturne, because we only have one fearsome blocker right now. So I'm not sure if it was a misplay on my opponent's part to actually play the 5/5 there. I probably should have open attacked, but he has a second elusive, so I guess it doesn't technically matter. This is close. This is really close, and this is why you need to prevent as much damage as possible, because we can't prevent this 2 elusive damage from coming through. It just is what it is. We have no elusive blockers. We have no other ways to damage it, to kill it. We have to kill the other one with the Ravenous Flock. So now we have this Riptide. We still are not able to use this Riptide. And if there's one weakness to this deck, it's exactly this. It's having a Riptide with no way to proc the Plunder effect. And honestly, that might have been a misplay on my part. It might have been me not being able to, just save something like a Make It Rain in the proper situations. Again, we kind of lowball with the RNG. But getting the attacks through to face, it does eventually get the Riptide out. Just probably not getting as much advantage as we'd like. But this is close. I mean, we're at 4. This is very, very close. This is closer than you want to be in an aggro matchup, but again, this is how you want to play a TF Swain deck against aggro. All right, guys, and finally, TF Swain in the books. Again, very surprised I haven't actually put anything out for TF Swain yet. That's crazy. It's just been so good. So I think, honestly, this might be one of the better decks in the format still. It's pretty fun to play, too. It's not like a boring control deck by any means. Spooky Karma, anybody? But as always, everybody, until next time, stay healthy, stay positive. I hope shit just works for you, and peace out.